Do you got an announcement? That's good. I guess I can jump right in. Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, tonight we're going to talk about. We're going to talk, and I usually come up with a title for my little talks, and tonight was funny enough. It's kind of a Disney theme tonight. I don't know why. Sometimes it happens that way, and tonight it's just that way. So tonight I'm calling this the Circle of Life. How many of you have seen The Lion King? No, just a few of you. The rest of you are going to be lost the rest of the time. Now we'll try to explain how this is going to work. Actually, this is the only mention of the Lion King I do tonight. So you're okay. How many of you have ever heard of the cliche, "What goes around comes around"? Yeah, that's a regular one, right? And what does that mean exactly? What goes around comes around. You reap what you sow. That sounds more biblical, doesn't it? Huh? What did somebody say?
More than you
What's? You reap what you sow. And if we look at sowing and reaping, it creates what shape? If you think about it. All right, a circle, right? You plant a seed, right? And it grows up into a piece of grass thing. Comes up and then it's harvested, right? So I don't know, I'll make a little sickle. Sorry, that's a sickle. Comes back around, and then, actually, it's really only a 3-step process. But out of that, what's the first thing the farmer has to do? But he gets the seeds from his harvest, doesn't he? Now we get it from southern states. But, in the old days, they didn't have southern states, so they would get some of their harvest here, they would hold it back, right, the seed, and then they would replant that the next year, right? And that's what's called sowing and reaping. It's a cycle, it's a circle. Well, in our lives, in the world that we live in today, everything speaks of God. Amen? God left signatures and God left patterns for us to find all through life. And of course, many He used in His Word to describe processes that we would talk about spiritually. We all understand, I'm not saying we all, hopefully most of you have heard of the principle of sowing and reaping in the Spirit, right? You sow and you reap. That's what Jesus said. You sow and you reap. You reap what you sow. Obviously, I'm not going to plant a pine cone and get wheat, am I? Right? But it's the same thing spiritually. This circle cannot be unbroken. Life is a circle. The circle of life. Okay? That was yeah, that was deep thought. That was my deep thought for the night. The rest of you, the rest of this time is going to talk. But think of some other things in life that are the same thing. It's a cycle. What's something? Without saying life. What's something else? That would be a cycle. Wake up. Day, night. That's a good one. Because that's a cycle, right? How many of you know what day and night is? What's the cycle of day and night? How many of you had first grade science? What turns? The earth gives us day and night, right? So the earth rotates. Give me another example.
The ocean.
The ocean?
Tide in, tide out.
Tide in, tide out. And that's directly related to what?
The moon.
The moon. Which does what?
Which
Reflects light. Nice. Not quite what I was looking for. Yes, you're right. Okay, I'll give you a bonus point for that. Yeah, but it's like that commercial, We thought it was made of cheese. We went to the moon, found out it was made of rock. We never went back. Behold the power of cheese. Just like that joke, that was cheesy. Actually, it was an old commercial. Anyway, what causes tides? The moon does what to the earth? You're getting too deep on me, all right? Let's go back to first grade. First grade, we're going back to first grade. What's the moon do to the earth?
Revolve.
It rotates around it. It circles the earth, right? So the moon rotates. Now, seasons, right? What gives us seasons? Now we're getting deeper, Chris. You may have to hang on here. How do we get seasons? The earth rotates the sun, right? The earth rotates the sun. And so, yeah, it orbits the sun, okay. The earth is circling, or the earth circles the sun, right?
You have the seasons.
Yeah, the seasons, which is a cycle, right?
What page are we on?
I don't know. I got lost a couple pages back. I'm winging it now. You know, my one shot now. I'm winging it. I'm winging this puppy. Seasons. Yeah, seasons is a cycle. So you see, and if you want to get into high school math like Chris is over here, you know, we can start talking about biological cycles, right? You know, life and death, and how, you know, the trees need us and we need the trees to, you know, and then we need to go hug a tree. No, that's not what I'm talking about. That's the wrong church. We love the environment, but we're not tree huggers. I don't like the last tree that crossed me is laying down in my yard right now. So, I'm not a tree hugger. But you see what I'm saying? Nature gives us or prophesies of the spiritual. In other words, it's saying everything is a cycle. Well, are cycles good or cycles bad?
Yes.
There you go. That's actually what I was looking for. Well, you know, cycles can be good, cycles can be bad, right? I mean, there's good and bad cycles. It's all about the seed. All right, now we're getting back. Now you're jumping ahead. You and Chris go stand in the corner. But you see, we are a part of this nature. Yes? Yes, we are. Man is a cyclic being. We like cycles too. So why do we like cycles? What is it about a man or a woman? Okay, I'm using man generally, but what is it about our race that loves cycles? We count on them regularly. Good. They're fun to ride, especially bikes. Unicycles, probably not so much. Maybe you learn how to do it. I don't know. Tricycles, oh joy. Motorcycles. So we have cycles in life. And if we go all the way back to the Garden of Eden, we can assume a couple things because of what happened there. We're not going to dwell on this. It's a sermon on itself. If you go back through our archives, I'm sure on the internet you can find where we talk about Adam and Eve and the whole what happened there. But I'm more interested in what happened to us to put us into this cycle. We ate from which tree? What? Knowledge of good and evil. We ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which gave us what? Knowledge of good and evil. It wasn't a good question. All right. So we have on one corner we have evil, and one side we have good. Now, and then we are directly affected by both good and evil. And that's where we get Mickey Mouse. Yeah.
Hadn't gone there yet.
What's that?
Hadn't gone there yet. I was still picking bubbles.
Back to bubbles. Back to bubbles. Better erase this before. Never mind. But we have good and evil. And it's interesting because even in other religions, they have this understanding. And there's a symbol that many of you would remember, or many of you have seen, I'm sure, that comes, and I couldn't even tell you which religion. It's one of the Oriental religions, maybe Buddhism or Hinduism, I'm not sure. I want to think Hinduism. Taoism. And what symbol am I talking about? The yin-yang. Does everybody know what the yin yang looks like? I'm going to draw it. It's not an occultic symbol, okay? Yes, it's two tadpoles chasing each other's tails, right? And I'm horrible at drawing. I don't even know. All right, maybe I should have brought a print out of the yin yang. Yeah, exactly. Can somebody draw me a yin yang?
Sure.
That's close. Close enough. And of course, we need the dark side of the moon and all that side. The reason why I want to draw this is simple. Because this symbol actually shows us a lot more than just good side, bad side. Because one of the most simplistic cycles, and I think one of the cycles that started in the earth at that moment when we had the knowledge of good and evil, was basically this. Because I kind of alluded to it earlier, but what does it look like these two sides are doing? If I started spinning this around, what would it look like? It looked like they were chasing each other, wouldn't it? The good chases the bad, and the bad chases the good. It's a forever cycle. It's a cycle, and it's a pattern. It's a cycle and it's a pattern that each one of us is a part of because of what happened in the Garden of Eden. Well, what are you talking about? Well, let's kind of get into the Bible here. And we're going to start in Deuteronomy. And I said it right for once. I didn't say Deuteronomy or Deuteronomy or Deuteronomy. Chapter 1, verse 34 through 40. And I'll read this and you can follow along. And it says this. Did you see it? Did you hear it? What's that? Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 34 through 40. Okay? And it says this, "And the Lord heard the sound of your words and was angry and took an oath, saying, Surely not one of these men of this evil generation shall see that good land of which I swore to give your fathers, except Caleb, the son of whatever his dad's name was. He shall see it, and to him and his children I am giving the land on which he walked, because he wholly followed the Lord. The Lord was also angry with me for your sake, saying, Even you shall not go there." This is Moses. "Joshua the son of Nun, who stands before you, he shall go there. Encourage him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit it. Moreover, your little ones and your children, who you say will be victims, who today have no knowledge of good and evil," that's important, "they shall go in there, and to them I will give it, and they shall possess it. But as for you, turn and take your journey into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea." And those of you who have read this story before, what happens next to the children of Israel?
They wander.
They wander for how long? 40 years. It's a long time. What's God trying to do during that 40 years?
Let them die off.
He's letting them die off. That sounds pretty harsh, doesn't it? God is letting them die off. Why do you think that's the case?
They mumble so much. Mumble and grumble.
They mumble and grumble so much. They didn't trust God, did they? But yet these children that were there at that time, they were the innocents here. And he wanted to make a point and said, look, they don't know good and evil. Now wait a minute. What did he just say? He didn't say they don't understand evil, did he? What did he say? They don't know good or evil, do they? What is he trying to say? They don't understand. They don't see the right and wrong in this situation. Was he saying they were sinless? No, of course not. Because we know there was only one man who was sinless on the earth, and that was... Okay, that's your token for tonight. I'm not going to give you any more easy questions. So the children of Israel are wandering around the desert for 40 years. They're wandering. They're circling, right? They're just wandering around the desert until the day that Joshua leads them in. We like patterns. We like scenarios. We like things the way we are, just like Israel did in Egypt. They didn't like their situation, did they? They were slaves, right? But at least they had some semblance of an understanding. What God's doing in the Israelites after the Exodus from Egypt is He's giving them a new set of guidelines and rules, which we call the what? The law, right? So as the Israelites are here, and they're inside of the promised land. That's the thing you don't understand. They're inside because He let Moses go up on top of the rock to see it. He said, there it is. You'll never set foot in it. So they were literally there. Because if you read the story on down, the people then repent. And they say, I'm sorry, we're sorry, we did evil in your eyes. Now let us go in. And he said, if you go in, you're going to be desolate. Because I'm not going in with you. You'll go by yourself. And so they wonder. But when they left Egypt, they had this rigid set, this structure, and they understood. It was a bad structure, it was a bad cycle for them, but they understood it. It's not very much unlike what we do. And through history, you will see man over and over again create and build cycles for themselves. We like cycles. Today, you could liken a cycle, and it sounds like a joke, but if you think about it, it's really true. 200 years ago, you could liken the cycle to a bicycle, right? It was slow, nice, easy going. Today, it would be more like one of those Japanese motorcycles, just zipping down the lane, because our culture has created just these incredible cycles of just, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. And so we're stuck in this cycle, in this rut. So we like patterns. We try to find patterns in everyday life. We all do find patterns in everyday life. And it was interesting because if you don't believe me, when I took psychology many years ago, the psychology teacher gave us a homework assignment. He said, now, and if you're interested, try this at home. And it is really kind of weird. When you go home and you take a shower either tonight or tomorrow or both, wash yourself backwards. Because if you're mindful and you start thinking about it, if you always start from the head to the toe, then go from toe to head. Or start in the middle and mix it up a little bit. And you know what majority of people will do? Any guesses? They will completely wash themselves again because they do not feel clean. Because they didn't follow the pattern that they normally follow. Human beings love patterns. How many of you have a routine in the mornings? You get up, you make your coffee. I can tell you our pattern in the morning. I get up, I make the coffee. Yes, he drinks coffee. I'm not kidding. I eat breakfast, she eats breakfast, we get the kids up, they eat breakfast, they get dressed, we get showers, Kissy leaves, I stay, I make lunches, we leave. Okay, but it is the same every morning. And you can almost time it, because it's a pattern, it's a cycle that I'm in. And so we have these everyday cycles that we're in, and we're not even aware that we're doing it. Not even aware. How many of you have ever gone to work and decided to take a different route to work? But then you feel weird when you get to work. You're like, this is really strange. I don't understand. I'll never forget when we were going to church here several years ago. We used to live in Witham, in about a 40-minute drive. And we moved up here, and it took 6 minutes to get to Princeton. And we're sitting in the parking lot, and I'm telling my wife, I feel like we need to go drive around Princeton for another half hour because we shouldn't be here already. This is weird. Can't do this. Well, Dan, where in the world are you taking this? Because I don't get it. Well, because how many of us have had cycles in our spiritual walk? How many of us have habitual things that we do in our everyday life with God, in our relationship with God, that we're not even aware that we're doing? Now, I grew up in a Methodist church, and I'm not bashing any particular denomination. I'm just saying this is my experience. But I know it's very common, and it's even more common when you get into more orthodox religions, such as Catholicism. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. Just completely left me. Like an Episcopalian church type setting. But I remember growing up, and I can recite you exactly what we did. See, every Sunday we would go. We would have the superintendent. Y'all remember the Sunday school superintendent would sit up front? I was that for several years after I got saved at this Methodist church. And I would sit up front and I would say, okay, let us pray. And we'd pray. And we'd be done. We'd sing a hymn. We'd sing a second hymn right after that. Then we had responsive reading. And then we'd have Sunday school. we'd come back from Sunday school, we'd have the hymn, and then we're done. Sound familiar? Yeah. Even here we have a way of doing things, right? How many songs do we normally sing on Sunday morning? Three and a half? Most of the time, 4. I know because we're back there. We actually have those words written down. Sometimes we don't because we don't like rituals necessarily. But as human beings, we all still adhere to that, don't we? So we have a ritual that we follow on Sunday morning. We do 4 songs. We have church news now, right? We have Miss Susie gets up and speaks, does announcements. Then we might or might not have special music, shaking it up a little bit. And then after that, Pastor Scott gets up and preaches, right? Every Sunday. Every Sunday.
Offering.
What's that? Oh, I forgot offering. Oh.
Offering.
Lord.
Hugging.
He's going to give me. Boy, he's going to really give it to me. No, I can't believe you forgot the offering.
I know.
I can't believe you forgot the offering. You know. Anyway, yes, we have the offering in there. And of course, we all get up and go to the offering instead of, most people passing. Anyway, but you get the idea. Well, we have, we even have patterns in our prayer life. How many of you have and I'm not saying this is wrong or bad, don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but how many of you have a cycle that you do as far as I get up, I read the Bible, I pray, or maybe you do it when you go to bed, or maybe you do it when you eat. I mean, a lot of us have cycles like that, don't we? Okay, this is my time to read, this is my time to pray, and I go through this routine. Not always bad, although sometimes it might be interesting to change it up and see what happens. I love doing stuff like that to myself. Weird. If you turn to Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7, God's reality, though, is nothing like it. And I've heard this preached before, and maybe, I may have actually taught it before, that, everything's a cycle. We have a circle, right? And everybody says a circle is infinite, right? Is a circle infinite? Okay. A circle's infinite. Let me get this thing out so I have a perfect circle. This circle's infinite. If I start here, where am I going to stop? Right? Huh?
Wherever you want.
Wherever I want. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. But we call this an infinite thing, and so a lot of times we try to describe God and the spiritual through things that we understand. And so I've heard it preached, wow, eternity's like just a big circle, right? It just goes on forever. It goes on forever. But see, the problem with that is that when we think about eternity and we think about God, is God infinite? Yeah, God is infinite. What's that?
Always was.
Always was, always will be. God is also infinite because think about this. The Bible tells us that He will be praised forever, right? How can you praise something forever if you finally get to the end and say, oh, well, I've seen all of God? Right? There's always something fresh, always something new. It's always going, wow, I've never seen that facet of God before. I heard a preacher one time, I thought it was a beautiful picture. He said, I could see the angels around the throne, and I believe it is in Isaiah, it's either Ezekiel, I can't remember which, where he describes the angels around the throne and they're covering their faces. And he had this beautiful picture, and he said, I can imagine these angels sitting at the throne praising God. And they have their wings over their faces, and they part just a brief bit, and they see a new facet of God that they've never seen before, and they're completely overtaken with praise, and they have to cover themselves and praise God. And they do that for eternity. Is that a good picture of an infinite God? Because the problem is with this whole idea is we see the circle as an infinite thing, but there's a problem with this picture. Anybody tell me what it is?
2D.
It's 2D, okay. It's 2D. But my point is, I've done something to this picture. If I put a person in here, now what does it look like? fence. Thank you. This is a confined picture. We look at this and we say, God is in the circle. God is infinite. God is forever. But what we're also saying is God is on a track. God is in a loop. God is consistently traveling in this one arena, in this one thing. And so we get a picture of God in eternity as just a big circle. When in fact, God in eternity, instead of being a circle, is something that we can't comprehend. He's a line with no beginning and no end. Because see, now what you have is you have a God that to us is beyond our understanding. What we see now is we see a timeline that doesn't end. If I'm here, if I'm in a circle and I'm here, where am I going to eventually end up? Right back to where I was, right? In eternity, will I ever end up where I was? I'm not going to, because if I'm here, I'm consistently moving forward. I'm never going to come back to here, and so everything remains fresh. The problem is that in our mindsets, we don't understand the concept of an infinite line. How many of you have ever sat in your living room or your bedroom or you can't sleep and you try to comprehend eternity? How many of you have done that before? What happens?
You drive yourself nuts.
You drive yourself nuts. You know, I've done that before and I get dizzy swimming. I'm thinking, wow, it's not good. Well, you know, it's going to happen here and then boom. No, that's not the end because there's an eternity after that. But why do we do that? Why do we have a problem with eternity? Why do we have a problem with eternity?
Because there's no cycle to it.
There's no cycle to it. There's no end. Everything in our world has an end, doesn't it? Are you going to live forever here in this present form? No. We know our lives in this form is finite. We understand I have a beginning and I have an end. And so, you know, in an apologetic circle, that's one of the problems that a lot of atheists has is, well, there's no way to contemplate infinity. Well, okay, there's no way to contemplate. There's no way to contemplate infinity. But think about this, it does exist in our world, or in our reality. Does anybody know why? There is something in our reality that is infinite. You know what it is?
Cockroaches.
Yes, because they're going to survive the nuclear war. Chris, I'm surprised you didn't get that. No, it's space. Because if I say go in that direction, are you ever going to... Now, let's say you miss all the planets and stars. Are you ever going to hit the end? There's never going to be a black wall that one of these days, you know, millions of light years, we're going to smack the edge of it and go, well, found the edge of the universe. It's not going to happen, is it? Because, see, infinity exists. And we can scientifically prove it. Infinity exists. Unless, of course, we believe we live in a big black box that's millions of galaxies away. Which is, to me, a little harder to explain than a God that created everything. That's just my take on it. So we have this picture. And I did this in apologetics. We did apologetics. And I kind of want to, and I'm getting to the punchline, so stay with me. Here I have a box. Does everybody here have a pretty good imagination? Pretty decent? All right. What I want you to do is I want you to imagine yourself a tiny little speck in this box. Okay? And I'm God. Anyway, sorry, my imagination flew away there for a minute. And, you know, if I'm God and I have this box, then what I've done is I've created this entire reality of time and space in this little box. And what I've done is I've put billions and billions of people in here. Okay? And they're on this tiny little speck in this little box. Now, if you're that tiny little speck in this tiny little box, do you know it? No. You don't know it. So, So to you, you see an infinity, right? Because you don't understand there's boundaries to this box. But you also have an awareness in yourself that there is a finite boundary. Because you live and die. But to God, is there an infinity? Is there a finite? See, that's the trick. Because God looks at our lives, our world, our entire timeline as that little box. God exists here, right? We exist in here, right? Because we can only contemplate the finite. We live, we die, things come to an end, things change, things do this, things do that. But they never get out of the box. And so what God did is He created this box. I remember they talked about where God wrote the book from end to beginning. And so He knows everything that happens in this box. Think about all time is in this box. So at any one point in time, God could open this box and say, I see Dan right here. He's speaking on a Wednesday night, March 23rd, 2011. He's right in this moment. And He knows what's going to happen to me when I get home. He knows I'm going to stub my toe when I go into the bedroom. Mainly because I do it all the time. But, He knows that. Why? Because He understands He's outside of the box. Can I foresee that? Can I foresee my future because I'm in the box? No. But can God do it? Easy. Why? Because He's outside of the box. He's outside the system. Well, Dan, what in the world are you trying to teach me? Because I'm getting really confused. Well, we draw pictures and we attempt to understand the abstract concept of infinity. And this is a lot like, what we talked about a couple weeks ago, where we have inadequate views of God. We try to place God in a box, so to speak, because we understand we're in a box. So I read the Bible and I say, well, the Bible says God is this, and God is this. So therefore, I put God in my little box. Is God in my little box? What's in my little box? My mindset, my view, my perspective of God is in this box. But there's no way you could fit God in a box, is there? But we try to do it with our theology. We try to do it in our spiritual lives. We try to do it because we as human beings need a pattern. We've got to figure out a pattern. That is directly linked to what we did with the tree of life, or the tree of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We partook and we became our own sovereignty. And what do you mean? Well, see, what we did with the tree of knowledge of good and evil is we said, okay, I'm taking on myself my own lordship, my own sovereignty. I'm becoming my own person. And because we did that, now we have to earn ourselves back to God. Because see, now we understand there's a good, there's a bad. Right? So now we try to earn ourselves into God. And so what God does is He says, okay, well, you've made this decision, so here's what you got to do. You read through the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, and the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And you listen to this law and this rigid set of rules and says, okay, this is what you have to do. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and we go on. It seems like it's going to go on forever. Have you ever tried to read Deuteronomy? Have you tried to read Numbers? It's worse. Unless you're a mathematician, you might enjoy that. I don't know. But, it's hard to read. But it's God simply doing one thing. All right, you need to do this. And I understand the way that you're now running. I'm going to give you a pattern. I'm going to give you a structure. I'm going to give you a box. And this box contains all the things that you have to do to make it in. Here you go. So He gives humanity a box through the children of Israel. Were they successful? Was it even possible? Turn with me to Galatians, if you want, or you can just listen. Galatians chapter 3, verse 24. If I can get there, I'll be right. Galatians chapter 3, verse 24. And you can read it in context, but it's pretty simple. It means what it says. It says, therefore the law was our tutor to bring us to Christ, that we might be justified by faith. The law was simply there for one reason, to show us, look, your patterns and your law and your structure isn't giving you anything. You have squat. You have a box, but you have no ability to keep it because the box is simply too big. You can't do it. You see it. You see the structure. And I say, here's the structure, here's the law. I can see it. Why can't we keep it? How many of you break the law every day? I should have made that a question. Don't raise your hands. I don't need to know that. We're going to have a special prayer for Sam afterwards. Well, that was completely messed up. No, we pretty much outside of the speeding laws and all that stuff. Okay, let's talk about felonies. Let's talk about felonies. Okay, how many of us commit felonies every day? Don't put your hand up. Because I don't want to know about that. We can keep felony laws, right? I'm not going out there murdering people every day. So why couldn't we keep this one? And a felony law doesn't have near the repercussions of this law, does it? So what's the deal? I'm asking you because I don't know. What's the deal? We can't keep the law because even though we love structure and we love pattern, there's one thing that we love to do more than being a pattern. We love to break it. Rules are made to be broken. There we go. That's why a good percentage of us break the law every day. Speeding, don't we? What's the speed limit? All right, depends. All right, that was a stupid question. What's the speed limit? Well, we're here, over there. I don't know. What's that? Yeah. What's the speed limit on 460 through Princeton? 55. How many of us go 55 or lower? Hands. I'm working on it.
I'm conserving gas.
Well, yeah. Before the gas crunch?
Yeah.
How many of us go just a little above? I'm going 57, 58 miles an hour because, But what am I doing? I'm breaking the law, right? Is a cop going to stop me for it? Well, it depends on the cop. But, probably not. But you see my point. We break the law all the time. Why? Because we love to do it. If the law came down tomorrow and they said, you know what? We're going to completely make it strict. 55, if we catch you going 56 miles an hour and get a ticket. A lot of us would stop doing that, wouldn't we? To some degree. Unless we didn't see a cop. But the whole point is, it's a little thing. Yeah, I might have to pay some money. Yeah, my insurance won't go. But I'm not going to see jail time unless you're going really, really fast. Put your hand down. So, I'm just, this is my little break free. How many of you, I'm getting in trouble now. How many of you have ever been on a diet before? I don't see no hands on this. What's the first thing you do after you diet for a week? You eat something you're not supposed to. What's that? You reward yourself. I love that, actually. And I'm not making fun. Yes, I am. But my wife went to a group, and I'm not going to say who the group was. I used to make fun and call it the weight gain group. Because they would go and it would weigh, and then immediately after their meeting, they would go to Ryan's. And I'm thinking, so my wife was like, well, I had a good time at Ryan's. I'm like, how much did you weigh? Oh, I lost a pound. Now, how much did you weigh after Ryan's? But dieting. We can't even diet. Should we diet? Should we be skinny little minis? No. We should be healthy, right? How many of us had a little Debbie cake today? No hands, I don't want to see it. But, we like to break the rules. We can't do it even if it means, our life. Because it's delayed gratification partially, but there's other reasons. So, and you learn this in the 7 laws of the learner. Why do kids break the rules a lot of times? In school? To test boundaries. Why? It's nature, but they also like boundaries. See, kids, they may be mad at you when you don't let them do something they want to do, or you don't. But it also, and they may not even understand it, but in the back of their mind, they understand that as a boundary. Look, if Dad doesn't want me to play in the road, there's a reason, right? I'm trying to protect them. Yes? Right? So we get into this mindset. And that's all, that's all good. But even as adults, we love boundaries. We love pattern. It's all the same thing. So what do you got to do about it? The key to breaking the cycle is to break the cycle. That's all I have tonight. Good night. That sounded a little obvious, didn't it? Yeah. So we're in this rut. How many times have we seen it? How many times have we done it ourselves? I've done it. I think everybody in this room can say you at least did it once. Have gotten yourself into a cycle, a bad one, where you have a situation in your life and you take it before God and you lay it on the altar. There's your church term. I lay it on the altar. And then what do we do as soon as we get up? We pick it back up and take it back to the seat with us. Why? Because we're in a pattern. We're in a cycle. A lot of times in a marriage counseling situation, you'll have, and I'm sure Scott's heard this before, I've heard it before, we were taught it in marriage and family therapy, and you learn it even in drug situations, drug dependency situations, is there's a cycle there. If you have a man and a woman who are married, and the man has a bad day, choose the wife out. Is the wife going to be in a very good mood? And then the wife spits in the dinner. And it's a loogie too. It's not just the he looks down at his mashed potatoes and he knows on me, right? What's going to happen? It's going to be a reciprocation, isn't it? He's going to do something again. And then what's she going to do? Oh, I'm sorry, honey. I'm not going to do that ever again. Yeah. And what you end up with, by the time it reaches a counselor's office, is you have this huge cycle. Well, yeah, I did slash his tires. But you should have seen what he did to me. He put my lipstick on a dog. He cleaned my toilet with my toothbrush. Go through and go through and go through. And it cycles and cycles. And what's the only thing that you can do in this situation?
Divorce.
Yeah. I feel good about that, yeah. Well, I guess technically she answered my question, but not in the way I wanted to do it. A counselor probably will never tell you to do that. But somebody's going to have to be the bigger person, aren't they? Because what you have here is you have a cycle. We talked about this. What's somebody have to do?
Break it.
You have to break it. Now, when that happens, do you think the second person reciprocates immediately?
No.
Not always. Sometimes, maybe. Not always. But if you can continue to break the cycle, what ends up happening is the other person goes, wait a minute, they're not playing anymore. And then you might actually get a reconciliation. You hope. Well, it's no different when I go to the altar with a problem, or I go to the altar saying, well, God, I've dealt with this for years, and, I need you to take this from me. I need you to deliver me from this issue. Does God do that from time to time? Sure he does. Yeah, he does. But there is a but in here. Sometimes, and I've heard it, drug dependency, cigarettes, stuff like that, somebody actually wants to quit doing cigarettes. I'm not saying cigarettes, I'm not going there, okay? But I am saying if somebody wanted to break an addiction of any type, I have seen situations where God just supernaturally just, and the person just walks away. I've seen it. But, I've also seen those same people that have supernatural deliverance. A year from then, what are they doing? Why? Because God supernaturally came in here and He broke the cycle. And He said, okay, I'm doing this. I'm going to help you. But you have a problem. What you have to do, and this is your end of the bargain, because it's not a bargain, but you get what I'm saying. What God's trying to say is, you have to also break from the cycle. Because in these situations, you have friends, you have habits that you do. And I think that's the biggest thing. I've talked to a lot of smokers that have tried to quit. And the biggest thing is, I tried to quit, but I always had to have something in my mouth. Because they were so used to that cigarette. It was a habit. And so they would find themselves finally, it's like, well, I'm not going to light it, but I'll just hold it. And then eventually it gets lit and off you go. But it's the same thing in anything that we can think of. It's a cycle, it's a pattern. Everything that we do is a cycle and a pattern. We need to understand that. The next time you go up there and you say, Lord, I need you to help me in this situation. Believe, have faith that God is going to help you through that situation. Believe that God is going to deliver you. But you have got to take steps in and of yourself to break that pattern. To say, I'm not going to cycle myself through this anymore.
Guilt and condemnation is a pattern also. When we have an addiction and we try to defeat it and we fail on our own and we let guilt and condemnation rule us, we get off of it for a while and we're right back in it.
Yeah, and thank you. You just rolled me right into where I was taking this. Because the worst pattern that we have to deal with is something that the church has dealt with for 2,000 years. And it's gotten worse in places, and I think finally we're beginning to understand, we're trying to break this cycle. But there's way too many people in the world, that are trying to stay saved. What do you mean? There's way too many people in the world that are saying, okay, I accepted Christ, but now I'm expected to do this A, B, C, and D, and E, and F, G. Just like we've talked about before. A lot of people have that mentality, I get saved, I follow the 10 Commandments. Right? It's because we like that structure. And what happens in what you're talking about with guilt and condemnation, it's the same deal. Because we're going to have it. We have, and it's different than being convicted. Guilt is a lot different than being convicted. Guilt is a servant of the law. You understand? Because what guilt does, it says, you need to stop doing this for the sake of not doing this. If you go through and you have a mindset and a mentality, okay, I accepted Christ, so now I've got to get into this loop and I've just got to run this loop and I've got to run this loop. Then what happens is you basically married Christ's sacrifice in the law. And you said, okay, I need this piece of structure. But what God did and what Christ did is on the cross, He broke that cycle completely. And He said, okay, here's what I want you to understand. I fulfilled the law so you don't have to. Now, the hard part for you is you've got to become free of the cycle. You've got to become free of that structure that you've built. And that maybe people have built in your life for years and years and years. We've got to break free from that. Because what happens is, and it sounds, it feels right. It sounds right that Christ died for me, so now I owe Him something. Right? How many can relate to that? Christ died for me, so now I owe Him a big one. Is that the way Christ looks at it? No. Because Christ came to give you freedom. But we're stuck in our own little circle of life. And so what we try to do is we fit Jesus into our own little circle of life. We fit Jesus into our routine. Like I said, I'm not knocking. Somebody's knocking. Yes, Lord. Be quiet now. I'm not knocking it, but they are. I'm not knocking the whole concept of I need a structured time when I go sit down and read the Bible and I sit down and pray. That's fine. If you need to do that, I understand. Because look, we're still carnal people and we still have cycles and structure that, it rules us. But what I'm trying to get you to understand is we cannot live our relationship with Christ in a structure because He's not living in a structure. Because anytime that we say, okay, God, I have to put you in a box. Thank you that Christ died. I don't have to follow the law, but I still need you to hop in the box. Because if you don't, I can't comprehend. Well, the point isn't to comprehend. The point isn't to understand God completely. Because guess what? You can't. Remember, God's infinite. He's the line traveling before and after. There is no way anybody in this room could ever get full revelation of God. But yet we try all the time. And guys, this may blow some theology. This is not a box. This is not a box. That's why this is important. It's very important. Why? Because this tells us who God is, right? Tells us what God did. Tells us, at least in part, a nature of God to get us started. So that we can say this is who God is. And now, in my prayer life, I discern and I use this as a codex, if you will, to say, is this really God or is this a vain imagination? But we can never look at the Bible and say, if it ain't in here, it's not God. You can't do that. Because you just said exactly what we said you couldn't do. You can't put God in a box. You can't put God in a book. But we try to. Right? You with me? We try to put God in a book. God doesn't make sense to us. Jesus said, to find your life, you got to lose it. To live, you got to die first. It doesn't make sense to me, do it? Does it to you? Not in the physical sense, anyway. But in the spiritual sense, it makes sense, doesn't it? We understand we have to die to ourselves. We have to die. Does that mean go sinless? No, it's not what it's saying. Die to that structure. Die to that pattern. Die to that nature in you that understands not that there is not a good and evil, but that we're not defined by good and evil. You're not defined by the good things you do, and you're not defined by the bad things you do. Jesus dealt with that at the cross. There is nothing you can do, good or bad, that changes you. Because you see, God's not stuck in the right. God's not stuck with the knowledge of good and evil going, well, they did good, they did bad. I know at the end of the day, sometimes it's hard. We fall from time to time, and it's easy for us to look back and say, man, I really messed up today, God, I'm sorry. God, I know you're looking at me different today. Do you really think God's looking at you different today? Why? Because you know what? Same deal. You know why? He's seen the end of it. Did you realize He saw your entire life and everything in it? Your structure, your pattern, everything that happens. He saw it before He sent Jesus to die. So is there anything you can really do to make God change His mind?
Well, it's not about us.
That's right. And in the end, that's the whole point. Because the moment we step out of our structure, He is all there is. He is eternal, and He is the infinite. And when we step outside, and what I believe is, when we finally shed our carnality, what happens is we step outside the box ourselves. And now we're able to see and go, huh, really? That's all it was? That's what it was? Because we're going to understand as God understands. And we're going to see what we came from. And we're going to see the patterns and structures that we held so close while we were alive didn't mean anything. Amen? Dig deep. All right, guys.